Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's KAC featured webinar presentation, Update on Kansas Department of Transportation's Road Usage Charge Study. And with us today, we have our presenter, Sarah Copeland, who is the Planning Section Manager with Burns & McDonnell, or we know it more informally as Burns & Mac. That's how I know them. But Sarah's joining us, and then also we have Joel Skelly, who's with us from the Kansas Department of Transportation. And Joel, you'll have to forgive me because I don't remember your title.
That's right, Kim. It's Director of Policy, and actually I am the KDOT project manager for this study and research that we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel, for that. I appreciate it. I apologize there.
Please.
So with that, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. A little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this webinar, so we'll be providing the recording link as well as the PowerPoint presentation out to everybody that registered, as well as it will be provided in Friday's Kansas County Happenings e-newsletter. And we will be taking questions. If you can find the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, just a little bit to the left of center, we'd like to have you put your questions there and or any comments that you have as the webinar is going along, and we will address those once the presentation is done. So with that, Ms. Sarah and Mr. Joel, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of our participants. And let's go ahead, and the mic is yours, Sarah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're really excited to talk to you about this project. And so you can hear more about the study, but we're also interested in hearing more from you. So we have some polling questions throughout the presentation today that we would love to get your input on, in addition to any questions you put in the Q&A box. So we'll give you just a minute to get ready. We have a few warm-up questions here. You can either do this on your web browser. If you're sitting at your desk or at a laptop, you can go to pollev.com and then enter KDOT. And so then as we get to the polling questions, they'll pop up on your screen, or you can respond by text on your mobile phone. You'll start by texting the word KDOT to 37607. And then as you see each screen, you'll just type in text in the letter of your answer as we get to those. So give you just another minute. This is just a few questions that we want to ask to know more about you, but also to get some feedback from you in some of the elements of the study as we move along. And then these instructions will also be repeated on each polling question slide as we come to them. So this first question is, which of these groups below are you part of? Are you part of a rural community, an urban area? Are you in the agriculture community here in Kansas? Are you involved in commercial trucking? Or E is for none of the above. So if you can just select your answer or text it in, we're curious to know a little bit more about the group of you that we're speaking with today. And it looks like most of you, 45% is the biggest group, are from rural communities, about 27% from urban areas. As people continue to text, you'll see these numbers slide a little bit. More and more rural communities are responding. We're getting up to 57%. Wonderful. And you'll see why we've selected these groups for this slide as we talk more about the study. I'm going to go on to the next question then. Our next question is, how would you rate the quality of state highways in your area? This question starts with A is extremely poor. We hope that that's not the case. B would be bad. C is average. D is good, or E for excellent. And again, we're asking for the quality of state highways in your area, maybe not necessarily statewide, but where you're located, how would you rate the quality of those? And it looks like we've got a little bit of a bell curve here, but good is the most popular answer right now, 44%. So that's always, I'm sure Joel is happy to hear that good and excellent are the most, together it looks like that's about 2/3 of answers. That's wonderful. And then one more question before we get into the meat of the study. And this, I'm going to read each of these. Which of these statements best describes your current opinion of transportation Kansas or transportation funding in Kansas? And you might, You might relate to more than one of these, but which one best describes your current opinion? So A, it's most important that transportation funding benefits everyone fairly. B is I don't mind funding changes as long as they don't inconvenience me. C would be I'm not sure we need to change anything, but I'd like to hear more to understand the issue. D is I can't get behind any changes until I understand how it impacts my bottom line. Or E, I think the state will make changes that benefit it, regardless of my opinion. So again, which one of these do you best describes your current opinion, even if you relate to more than one, A, B, C, D, or E? And I'll give you just a minute to think about that and put in your responses. Right now, it looks like we've got a lot of A's. It's important that transportation funding benefits everyone fairly, and then a good number of E's who think the state will make changes that benefit it regardless of your opinion. Hopefully we've gotten everybody's responses there. It's interesting to us to see where people start out, because I know you probably don't think about transportation funding on a daily basis, but it's definitely an important, KDOT staff thinks about it on a daily basis. And it's important as we think about the future of getting around the state. So let's start the first section of our presentation here. We know that a good transportation system is important to Kansans. And just to give you an overview of what comprises the transportation system, Kansas has the 4th largest public highway and local road system measured in miles. The top 3 states are Texas, California, and Illinois. So states that are a little bigger than us geographically and also have a bigger population. So it's interesting to see how much KDOT takes care of. KDOT's responsible for 9,387 miles of roadway in the state. And we also have a lot of bridges. We're 5th in the nation for number of bridges. The top 4 states, again, Texas, Illinois, California, and Ohio. There are 5,128 state-owned bridges in Kansas. Over 99% of those are in good or fair condition. But of course, those numbers don't include city or county-owned bridges. So it's also important to understand how transportation is currently funded. We're funded by a variety of sources. You can see them here. Most are protected through the state constitution, meaning that funds can't be diverted for other uses, with the exception of sales tax that's deposited in the state highway fund that's shown in that darker blue. So to dive into that a little more closely, this is the current revenue mix for the state highway fund. You can see that state and federal fuel taxes that are shown in the gold colors make up about 41% of KDOT's total revenue, and sales tax is currently about 38%. Sales tax is not a protected revenue stream, so it can be diverted. We also know that sales taxes hit lower income households a little harder than higher income households. Of course, vehicles are changing, and that means that transportation is changing. EV sales continue to rise every year. 2022 was another record-setting year for electric vehicles. This chart shows plug-in electric vehicles, that's the PEV, and that includes all electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. So in 2022, plug-in electric vehicles exceeded 7% market share for the first time, and that market share has tripled over the last 2 years. Even in Kansas, where the number of EVs is relatively small, we're seeing an increasing number of EVs being registered, and that trend is only increasing. Last year, 2022, there were about 4,500 EVs registered in Kansas. In 2021, that number was only 3,100. So we see that number continuing to increase. There are also several federal programs out there right now that will probably influence these numbers and continue to push them up. So even if an EV is not the right vehicle for you, we expect the number of EVs to continue going up. And of course, automakers are also phasing out gas-powered engines, which will continue increasing that EV trend. We expect 50% of vehicles to be electric by 2050. When we started this study in 2021, the projection was 40% of vehicles electric by 2050. So that just indicates the continued pace of change. So when we think about transportation funding, adoption of EVs means more vehicles using our roadways, but not contributing to funding the system through the motor fuels tax because EV drivers aren't buying any gasoline. But this change that we're seeing is not just about electric vehicles. All types of passenger vehicles are becoming more fuel efficient. And we're also driving more miles. So our vehicles are collectively going longer distances, but buying less fuel and so paying less into the system. And this trend is great for our own wallets. It's great to be more fuel efficient. It's great to be paying less for gas if we can, but it also has an impact on how KDOT plans for our transportation system. So going back to our pie chart, as more people buy EVs and other vehicles become more fuel efficient, fuel taxes shown in gold are going to become a smaller piece of the transportation funding pie. And that means that Kansans will increasingly rely on state sales taxes to pay for our transportation investments. So again, because state sales tax is not a protected revenue, that means it can be diverted for other uses, even if we have continuing transportation needs. On the other side of the ledger, construction costs keep rising. This shows the National Highway Construction Cost Index, which shows how much construction costs are increasing over the past 10 years. And we've had particularly steep jumps in the last couple of years. We checked this in last month. It was the 2022 Q3 was still the most recent part of the index. We keep expecting this number to turn the corner and start to decrease, but it has not done that yet. So with fuel taxes flat, state or sales tax revenue not being reliable, costs accelerating, we need to look at transportation funding differently. And that's why KDOT decided to study this issue to understand what other options might be available and whether those options might work for Kansas. So I want to ask you again a few more polling questions and get some of your thoughts here. One question that we have for the group is, what kind of vehicle do you drive in your daily activities? And if you need a reminder on how to respond, the URL is at the top, or you can text in your answers to 37607. Do you drive an internal combustion engine car, truck, or SUV? Do you drive a hybrid? Do you drive an electric vehicle, or are you driving something else? That would be option D in your daily routine. So A, internal combustion engine, B for a hybrid, C for any EV drivers out there, or D for something else. And it looks like everybody in our group is driving an internal combustion engine car. That's what I would be driving myself. So we'll go on to our next question. How far do you drive in a typical day? Are you somebody who lives close to where you work, or you aren't in the car every day and you drive less than 5 miles? Do you drive 5 to 50 miles? Not too far. Do you drive 50 to 100 miles? That's option C. Maybe you're driving a farther distance in your commute, or you're driving kids around to lots of activities. Or D, more than 100 miles a day. And it looks like we do have a few people who are driving quite a bit in their daily routine. So, but 70s, about 3/4 of you are driving 5 to 50 miles per day, it looks like, in your daily routine. And then one more question in this section: do you currently keep track of your mileage on a regular basis? So A, yes, every day you keep track of the mileage you drive. B, sometimes you're tracking your mileage maybe for a particular purpose. Or C, no, I don't track my mileage. And it looks like about 60% of you don't track your mileage. Oh, no, that number's fallen. So not very many people are tracking their mileage every day. And the rest of about 90% of you are split between sometimes and no. That's good, interesting for us to know. So as we think about the future of transportation funding in Kansas, one possible solution that we're discussing with our concerns about the gas tax and motor fuels revenue is to move from paying at the pump through the motor fuels tax to paying for miles driven, which is a road usage charge. Kansas isn't the only state that's thinking about this issue. This is a national conversation. Many states are examining options for addressing flat or declining motor fuels tax revenues. This map shows you that some states are doing research. Some states are deciding to raise registration fees. We have many states, though, that are exploring a road usage charge. And you can see that 4 states here have enacted programs. Oregon, Utah, and Virginia have all adopted RUC programs. these are primarily voluntary programs. Hawaii just adopted a new RUC program that will start implementation, I believe, in 2025. We also have many states that are doing pilot projects or demonstrations, that's shown in green. And then we have some states that are doing research, like Kansas is right now. So it's a national conversation. But to date, the discussion around usage charge has primarily been dominated by research on the East and West coasts. So Kansas got interested in doing this study to be able to bring a Midwest perspective to this study. We know that it's important to bring the perspective of rural communities, the agriculture industry, and commercial trucking to the design of a RUC system. And these are important sectors for Kansas. So we want to ensure that we're hearing from these stakeholders and we understand how a RUC might impact these sectors as part of the study. Our study, again, is about exploring alternatives. It's not about making final decisions or adopting a program, but we are the first DOT to engage drivers in helping to design a pilot project as part of our study. So this is a 3-phase study that KDOT's embarked on. We are, as you can see at the timelines at the bottom, starting to wrap up phase 2. So in phase 1, we focused on learning more about the existing landscape, learning about concerns from rural communities, agriculture, and commercial trucking. In phase 2, we conducted user-centered research and did some financial modeling. And this is the work that we're starting to wrap up. And then in phase 3, we're going to conduct a pilot to put our research findings to the test and learn more about how a RUC might work. So to tell you a little bit more about what we've learned in these first 2 phases of the study, in phase 1, we did a statewide survey. Some of you might have taken part in that survey. It was conducted in the winter of 2021. We received 925 total responses. One of the questions we asked was around awareness of the local fuel tax or the current fuel tax and how much people pay annually. You can see about 40% knew that the state fuel tax per gallon was 24 cents for fuel, 26 cents for diesel. More than 40% knew about that, but the majority did not know how much they personally paid annually in fuel taxes. We also asked respondents how familiar they might be with the idea of a road usage charge. In general, people were not very familiar. Rural respondents were less likely to be familiar with a RUC than urban respondents, but of everyone somewhat familiar was the top response. Not many people knew a lot about RUC. We also asked questions around fairness. Currently, people who drive less fuel efficient cars pay more fuel tax per mile than people who drive more fuel efficient vehicles. So our question was about whether people thought a road usage charge would be more fair, less fair, or about the same as a fuel tax. Rural respondents were more likely to consider a RUC to be less fair than urban respondents. We believe that that's primarily a concern about driving longer distances. So these are the 4 research themes that we focused on in the second phase of the study. We're looking at trust. What needs to be true about a RUC program for it to be considered trustworthy by the people who are participating? And so what institutions or organizations do people consider trustworthy today? And how do people perceive the trustworthiness of different RUC options? We were examining fairness and equity. So what needs to be true of a RUC program for it to be considered fair to all users? And what aspects might be considered fair or unfair? We were also examining comprehension and acceptance. So what needs to be true about a program for it to be really understood by the people using it and then accepted? And what aspects of a RUC system might be confusing for people? And then 4th was implementation preferences. What technologies are people currently using that might be applicable to a RUC program? What are the trade-offs people are willing to make between privacy and accuracy or cost? So we were exploring these questions through user-centered research. So user-centered research is exactly like what it sounds. You go out and talk to users and ask them to help you design the system. So we did user-centered research last fall and went out and talked to Kansans in all 6 of KDOT's districts, in urban and rural areas. We were particularly focusing on people in the agriculture sector and commercial trucking as well, and asked them questions and led them through activities to think about how could we put together a pilot program to test this idea. A few of the findings from that user-centered research we found that Kansans really do want to be involved in exploring options around RUC and giving their feedback and their opinion. We also had some findings around choice and flexibility. Kansans want to have choices in how they might participate in the program, and they want to have flexibility. So they want to make sure that their own needs are met, but they also want to make sure that everyone pays their fair share into the system. I mentioned we had a couple of focus areas with agriculture and commercial trucking. In the ag sector, Kansans working in agriculture appreciate the need for well-maintained roads. If you are growing crops or if you are raising livestock, eventually you know you need to get your livestock or your crops off of your farm and to the market, and well-maintained transportation system is a very important part of that. But we also heard very much that ag businesses are sensitive to transportation-related costs and taxes, and that was something that we knew then we would have to incorporate into the study. And then commercial trucking, the commercial trucking industry also appreciates the need for well-maintained roads since they're using them every day. But because they are, often going longer distances, they also understand how important it is that this be a national conversation. This industry is also very familiar with automatic reporting devices because they have to do so much reporting themselves. So those are just a few of our initial study findings as we finish the first 2 phases of our study and we start to look to phase 3, which is when we will test these findings with a demonstration program. Before we get to that, another polling question for you all. At this point, based on what you've heard about the study, we're interested in what you think is the most important concern to address in designing a RUC system. So again, you can respond on your web browser or by texting your answer. A would be the most important concern to address is a system that's fair for all Kansans. B is a system that is easy to understand. C is you think it's most important to have a system that is trustworthy, and then D would be the most important issue is a system that's secure. So A, fair to all Kansans, B, easy to understand, C, trustworthy, or D, secure. What is the most important concern to address in designing a RUC system? So it looks like right now, the top answer is a system that's fair to all Kansans. That's about 60% of respondents. Obviously, it's important for us to think about all 4 of these issues, but it's interesting for us and the study team to see what rises to the top for people as they hear about a potential RUC system. So in our 3rd phase of our study, we're going to transition to testing RUC in a pilot. So this phase 3 pilot, I think it's important to point out that again, we're not adopting a RUC system as part of this study. This is an opportunity to try it out and see what works and what doesn't work. The pilot's being designed based on all of the feedback that we've heard from Kansans in phase 1 and phase 2 of this study. Conducting the pilot doesn't mean that we will adopt a RUC system in Kansas, but it does allow us to learn what does and what doesn't work for Kansans. In putting together the pilot, we will be recruiting a number of pilot participants in rural communities, in agriculture industry, in commercial trucking, and also people who aren't part of these 3 focus areas, people who live in rural or urban areas to allow us to do some comparisons. We will be recruiting people who drive all types of vehicles, all engine types. So EVs, internal combustion engine, passenger cars, heavy duty vehicles. We want to incorporate everyone. And we're looking for it. We expect at least 400 drivers of light duty vehicles. So the passenger vehicles that you drove to work this morning or that you're going to drive to the store tonight to, pick up groceries. 400 to 800 participants who are driving passenger vehicles. We're expecting about 50 participants who drive medium duty vehicles and about 50 driving heavy duty vehicles to allow us to learn more about, that's particularly the commercial trucking and possibly the agriculture sector as well. So this will be a pretty good sized pilot for us. We expect the pilot phase to be about a 3-month period. So if you're participating, you'll participate for about 3 months in the winter, spring of 2024. So at the beginning of next year is when we're expecting to start pilot participation. And then we're going to offer some options for people to test different kinds of mileage reporting. So there might be some people who are testing manual reporting where you are filling out a form on paper and providing your mileage reporting that way. We might do some assisted reporting where you would go to another location, for example, your county courthouse or maybe a county extension office, and someone would help you with reporting your mileage. For some people, we might be testing odometer photos where you would take a photo of your odometer showing your current mileage and then send that in to track how far you've driven. And some people might be testing a smartphone app that would allow us to use your smartphone to report your mileage. So we'll have some options available to people who are participating in the pilot. So again, a few more polling questions. How likely would you be to participate in a ruck pilot? A, absolutely, you're ready to sign up now. B would be you're a 4 out of 5 on the scale. C is a maybe. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. E is you would definitely not be interested in participating, and D is kind of between that maybe and that no. So give us a sense. We know that we've given you just a very high level overview, but curious what you're thinking and how likely you would be to participate. It looks like we've got about a third of you are maybes. We've got a few absolutely yeses, which is nice. We're not signing people up today, but it's good to know that there's interest in participating in the pilot. Then we have a question on what kind of mileage reporting would you prefer to test out of those 4 options? A is manual reporting. You'd prefer to fill out a paper form to provide. B would be assisted reporting. You'd want to go somewhere where someone could help you with the reporting. D is the odometer photo where you could snap a photo and send it in. Or D, you'd prefer to test something with your smartphone. And it looks like we've got a lot of people interested in the high-tech option of using their smartphone to participate in the pilot. That's very interesting as we think about choices and knowing what people might choose. So thank you for your thoughts there. And then this last question, more open-ended. Why would you be interested in participating in the ruck pilot? And it's easiest if you just think of one word to send in that you can text in or type in. You're curious, you want to be helpful, you just like the idea of participating in something new. You want to help our research. So just curious in what would be driving you to participate in the pilot program? Lots of curiosity and helpfulness, which is great to see. So any other thoughts that you have about why you would participate, you can just send those in here, and then the word cloud will just keep growing. So this is the end of our presentation. We know that we've presented a lot of information in a relatively short period of time. We appreciate your giving us some feedback as part of the polling questions. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have also.
Thanks, Sarah. So I might add just a quick end note. I think from Kansas or KDOT perspective, we greatly appreciate all of this insight that you guys are willing to share with us. And I want you to know that this is not the end of the conversation. We want to continue this dialogue with you all because we are very interested, and we want to and don't feel that we can do a good job if we don't hear from folks about their interests, about their concerns. So that's a critical piece of this. We want to have that dialogue, and we want to get people talking about it to really get a better feel for what may or may not work in Kansas.
We have a question. We have a couple of things for you. First question is, how can we sign up to participate in the pilot program? How about that?
That is a great question. So first, it's important to know that we won't be signing people up to participate in the pilot program until later this year. So we're still working on putting the finishing touches on how the pilot will work, and getting ourselves ready to start enrolling people. So we will be starting that recruitment process later this fall. One way that you can make sure that you hear updates about the sign up process is to go to our website, and I will go, going to advance one slide here. ksdotike.org/ruc-study. You can sign up there for study updates, and we will let you know when pilot participant recruitment starts, and then we'll have a process for you to sign up and to get set up as part of that study later this year.
Okay, and Jessica shared, thank you very much for the presentation. I feel like transportation funding is crucial to the future of our infrastructure. And then Daniel's got a question. Does the need for toll roads go away with the RUC program? Could the KTA have a higher charge than other roads? Could local roads have fees layered on top? So there's several questions there for you.
So all great questions. Sarah, I might take this one quick.
Sure.
I think answering the first piece as far as the KTA, we are partnering with the Turnpike as well to really have them involved in this discussion because they operate 200, I think it's 286-mile stretch of interstate there in Kansas. I don't know that it will necessarily cause KTA to go away. And there definitely could very well be different rates for what a road usage charge might look like at the state level and what the Turnpike currently or would be proposing as rates on their system. So there may be a mixture there, but we want to make sure that here's a consideration to think about, that we're not charging the road usage charge on top of the Kansas Turnpike charge for that use of that system. So they get their own funding for that system, so that then right now how it works is you actually pay your motor fuels tax for all the gallons of gas you use, but then you also pay the toll for the use of that tollway. That would be an opportunity for us to not necessarily have that road usage charge also applied to the Turnpike, where they would be charging their own rate. Again, lots of dialogue, lots of conversation to happen yet with that. And as far as the local roads piece, that's another consideration that yes, there could be talk about a local jurisdiction, whether it be a city or a county or a region, considering a road usage charge for their infrastructure. As was mentioned earlier in our slide deck, there's a lot of local jurisdiction roads that are not under our control or our maintenance purview. And so that could be a way for local communities to do that. However, we do have currently the Special City County Highway Fund that's a portion of that motor fuels tax that's collected, that in these discussions that we're having now with the road usage charge, that could be a portion of what is collected on the road usage charge, where a portion of that funding, similar to how the Special City County Highway Fund works, could work in that way. Kim, I think I got all three of those questions kind of answered.
You did, and we've got more. You guys they're racking them up here for you. So Dawn asked the question, how do we recover funds from out-of-state drivers?
So that's a really good question. This study is just looking at Kansas drivers. So we'll be enrolling Kansas drivers in this study and asking them for their feedback. This study is also coordinating with the Minnesota DOT and other states that are part of the MASTO. And Joel, I'm going to miss this acronym, the Mid-American Association of State Transportation Officials.
Yep.
So other Midwestern states that are participating with us in portions of this research, and that we hope to have some participants from some of these other states potentially as part of the pilot. So we're looking at partnering with them, but right now the study is focused on Kansas drivers. We know though that people don't just drive in their own state, and that there might be a national conversation about RUC at some point in the future. But for right now, we're concentrating just on Kansas. Joel,
Yeah.
anything else that we should add there?
I would just add that, yeah, going back to the earlier in the conversation where we talked about it being fair and equitable across all users, that's an important piece. And we want to make sure that all users are paying for the use of that, because when somebody from out of state does come into Kansas and is driving and maybe buys motor fuel, we do get funding from them from that purchase. By the same token, we want to take that into consideration as we move forward in the discussion and how we're studying or looking at road usage charge. But as Sarah mentioned, we're trying to take a smaller, more manageable bite right now to get ourselves into the conversation, and then further do research on with other states and quite frankly at the federal level to see what might happen from the federal standpoint. And there's lots of different ways that we could potentially collect that revenue. So yeah, there are far more questions than there are answers. As Kim, I think you're probably seeing in the chat.
Yes, we've got the next question from Keith, KAC Zone Keith Browning. All methods in the RUC pilot program are self-reporting mileage. Is there thinking that this will be automatically reported as newer vehicles comprise a larger percentage of all vehicles?
Yes, that is definitely an option as more, as our fleet gets younger, as people buy new vehicles, telematics could be an option for that. That's not something that we're planning to test in this pilot, partly because, although there's a technology element to it, in some ways that might be a little bit easier to remove the human element. And we're interested in testing what these other options might look like and how they might work for the state. Anything else you want to add, Joel, to that?
No, I think, Sarah, that's a good question. I think that, or a good answer. I think the question, Keith, is important as we move forward. We're constantly thinking about how technology may change to allow us to better serve the public. And that could be part of it, is it makes it far more easy with that sort of technology for people not even to have to think about it. Similar to when you go to the pump, you don't think about it. You just go buy gas. And so trying to provide that ability, I think, is the end game for this whole process. But it's multiple steps out, I think, just because it's still not a readily consumed product yet or available.
Great answer, thank you. Now, Ashley's got a question. Is KDOT looking at other revenue models, e.g. the delivery tax on Amazon and Colorado, as part of this study or elsewhere?
So actually, we are not considering it as part of this study, but we are also monitoring the other potential revenue sources or streams that are being talked about in other states, like the Colorado example. Another example is to our south. Actually, you probably saw on the map or may have noticed that Oklahoma is exploring a road usage charge pilot, or actually embarking on one. They are also looking at a kilowatt hour charge on charging when you charge your electric vehicle, a tax on that kilowatt hour when you charge your vehicle. So there are multiple different options that some states are looking at, including those two, as well as RUC. I think the big question for us is trying to find something, as we've put it, in a sense that may be more so fuel agnostic, so that we don't know what we just mentioned with the telematics. We don't know what technology is coming next. Right now, electric vehicles, the lithium ion batteries are big in the market, but that doesn't mean that 10 years from now, hydrogen or some other means that I can't even dream up yet, it comes about that people are using, and it becomes a far more effective or efficient way to travel. So those are things that we have to take into consideration. So as we, again, tried to focus in on a few pieces, we didn't want to go too broad and get lost in the forest, essentially, without seeing what we were going for.
We have got a question from Don. How do you keep track of miles driven on state and local roads? And I'm not, does that make sense to you guys? Okay.
So that's a great question, and Sarah, please fill in if anything I here. But I think
Sure.
the big thing is that's an unknown yet. So if we did it from a manual reporting where you're writing it down, we don't. Quite frankly, we don't, because it's not, there isn't really a way to, other than making sure that the person is like, oh yeah, okay, I exited off of this roadway onto this roadway and I'm writing it down. And we don't expect people to do that. That's a lot. So, but then to the other extreme or end of the spectrum that we're considering with the smartphone or the inboard telematics, you can actually, with technology, create geofences around different areas where you'd be able to tell, okay, I'm on my own property on a ranch or something, as opposed to I'm on the interstate system, or I'm on a county road as opposed to a city street when I'm entering into a city. And so that would allow people to identify specific sections of mileage or roadway usage that you're using. But there's a pretty broad spectrum in between, and there are pros and cons to how you put that technology out there or use that technology from a public perception standpoint. And I'm sure everybody's automatically thinking, well, if you're knowing where I'm traveling, then you're tracking me. And that's not necessarily our intent. We want to know the use of the miles on the system. And so there are multiple ways to do it. Whereas if you did a manual reporting, you may be paying a lot more for mileage that technically you're not really getting the benefit from that payment essentially for it. Is that, Sarah, does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Good answer.
Okay, now Paul asks, what is the proposed implementation timeline?
Good question. I might ask if he's talking about implementation for the pilots. Specifically, because we aren't looking to implement a program at all on this, but the pilot, as Sarah mentioned, we're looking to start sometime early 2024 calendar year, so the winter and spring months of 2024 for the pilot. I'm assuming that's what the question was about.
Yes, I think so. And Paul, you can comment further in the Q&A if that did not answer your question. So we've got Don asked during the rec, how will out-of-state miles show up on your mileage, aka in and out of Missouri while in the KC metro area?
So that's similar to a part of the answer Joel gave about tracking county or local roads. So if we are, our manual reporting methods will just be tracking total number of miles, not necessarily where you're driving those. One of the options that testing a smartphone app gives us is the opportunity to see, can we track whether people are driving in Kansas or in Missouri? So there might be an option there. But again, the part of our study is we're trying to figure out how this works and what does and doesn't work about it. So the smartphone option might allow us to test in state versus out of state, but the others are just testing the mileage reporting itself. Joel, is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I think that's really what we're looking at.
Great. Okay, now Randy's got a question for you. Will the road charge study be done in metropolitan areas or rural mostly?
Well, I think the answer is really yes. We want to test this in both areas. We talked a lot in the presentation about our focus areas being rural and agriculture and commercial trucking, but that doesn't mean that we only want to test it in rural areas or for those groups. Really, part of our study focus is on that because those three areas have not been as much of a focus for other states in doing their studies or testing in pilots. So that's our focus area, but that also means we still need to test this with urban drivers and in urban areas as a comparison. We really want to recruit pilot participants from all over the state so that we know we're getting lots of good feedback from all sectors, even if we're also focusing on recruiting people in those three focus areas. So yes, we want to test it in rural areas and urban areas everywhere in Kansas.
Great. Okay, and we've got a final question here, unless anybody else get your question up there. If you've got one, a pressing, burning one on your mind, because it does help Sarah and Joel as well when they go back and put everything together. So Does the state charge a tax currently on charging stations?
Great question, and no.
Easy answer.
I'm sure that the follow-up question will be, well, is it a thought?
Kim, great follow-up. I think we're not considering anything at the moment. Again, we're looking at the road usage charges, a possible option, but we are, as I'd mentioned, monitoring the other possible options that people are exploring. Like I said, with Oklahoma actually looking at a tax on that. So it's not completely off the table, but that's not our focus at the moment. We're really looking at this from a road usage charge standpoint.
Awesome. Well, boy, great questions. You guys generated a lot of interest in as well. We really appreciate the polling. That was a great way to see too, kind of what everybody was thinking with this. So I'm not seeing any other questions pop up. As Joel and Sarah both mentioned, bookmark that website address, ksdotike.org, RUC-study there. That'd be a great way if you're really interested in, keeping abreast of this as well. We will continue here from KAC to share all of the important information that KDOT and Burns and Mac are providing on this study. And I'm sure you see an email address there. So, you go about your business this next week or two and things come to mind, send them to that email address. Because I know that, just when we finish today's call, that's not stopping the study. And that's also, I know Sarah and Joel will continue to want to receive input. So you guys are a vital and important part of this study being spread all across Kansas. Also, if you would, I would ask that you would share it within your counties if you get a chance. Share this presentation with your folks so that too they might be interested in the pilot program and or more discussion on this, because this is going to impact all of us as the days move forward and the ever-changing technology and on the roads and in our vehicles. And oh look, I talked long enough. I got another question for you. Darren's asking, any thoughts on a tire tax? Everyone needs one of those. Hopefully 4 of those as well.
Great question. And actually, I don't know that we have really seriously considered that in the past. That might be something for consideration moving forward too, as another option.
Awesome. Good questions. Well, I think Joel and Sarah, I really want to thank you for your time today and joining us and sharing this. This is exciting information. I mean, this is, ever changing. And I remember this being talked about with my days at KDOT. So, and that was way back in the day already, it feels like. It just everything's changing so quickly. But again, we look forward to hearing more about the implementation of the driver portion, tracking the mileage and stuff. And also just remember, we are always here and ready to share any information, or if you need more input or anything like that, please reach out to KAC and our Kansas County members, because they are always really, willing to able to provide, information for you. And we do appreciate our state highways. I will say that. Thank you so much for those.
Well, thank you very much for hosting us today. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you and to answer questions and to get your feedback. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and thank you on behalf of KDOT really for all your county partnership that we've had over the years, and look forward to future years of that same partnership and really conversation. And Kim, same thing with the association. I mean, we really do appreciate the partnership and the ability to come and present.
Well, with that, we'll let everybody get back off to their daily adventures. And with that, We look forward to hearing about this more in probably 2024 or later 2023. So thank you again, and everybody have a great Kansas day. Safe travels.